Good evening, everyone. I am Nada Ayed, Associate Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences here at the Cooper Union. Thank you for joining us. If you're new to the Cooper Union, welcome. This institution is among the nation's leading colleges for students pursuing degrees in architecture, art, and engineering. From its founding in 1859, Cooper has advanced the principle that free access to education for all working people, regardless of race, gender, or religion, is imperative to a democratic society. At the core of that mission is a commitment not only to technical and professional education, but also to the kinds of critical, imaginative thinking about society and the production of knowledge that only a foundation in the liberal arts can provide. One of the most important skills we strive to cultivate in our students here at Cooper is the capacity to write and communicate in ways that defy and unsettle disciplinary expectations. And so we're especially thrilled to be hosting tonight's conversation and readings with such incisive and original voices at the intersection of science and literature. I want to thank the National Book Foundation and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for presenting tonight's program and partnering with us to make this event possible. My thanks also go to Café con Libros, who are selling books by our 3 featured authors. Now to get to the evening. It is my great pleasure to welcome the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, Ruth Dyke. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Dean Ayed, for that warm welcome. Tonight, we're celebrating science and literature, a new program from the National Book Foundation, now in its 2nd year, which highlights exceptional writing across genres in science and technology. In just a moment, I'll turn over the mic to the VP and Program Director at the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Doran Weber, whose belief in great books has not only made this program possible, but has funded hundreds of authors through Sloan's book program over the past decade. In addition to Doran and Shreya at the Sloan Foundation, many thanks to the National Book Foundation's board, staff, and interns, most especially the amazing Natalie Green and Emily Lovett, Kalima and Allison at Café con Libros, yeah, right? And the Cooper Union, especially Kim Newman. Most importantly, we would not be celebrating tonight without the tireless work of the brilliant interdisciplinary 2023 Science and Literature Committee, Ben Green, J. Drew Lanham, Latif Nasser, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, who is our fearless chair, and Weike Wang. Thank you all so very much. Thank you for your careful and caring reading and your stewardship of this program. Whoops. Our fearless committee chair, Aimee, will introduce these books more beautifully than I ever could. And so I'd like to say simply, thank you, Sabrina and Brandon and Xiaowei, for your beautiful books, for your words, for helping me better understand blockchain and biochem and volcanoes through a shared heartbeat of such thoughtful, human, and queer storytelling. And tremendous thanks to Jennifer Baker for helping us bring these great minds together on stage in a brilliant conversation. At the National Book Foundation, we work year-round across our prizes, education, and public programs to connect readers across the country with exceptional books, which is why it's always so special to be gathered in a room of book lovers as we are tonight and to connect on topics that matter so much in this current moment and the next. Thank you all for being with us. If you're able to support our work from large-scale book distributions to free topical events to our brand new Teachers Fellowship, you can find out more information about our work and donate at our website, which is nationalbook.org. And now, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Doran Weber, the Program Director and Vice President at the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you. On behalf of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this award ceremony for our 2nd annual Science and Literature program honoring excellence and diversity in science writing. In a moment, you will hear from our wonderful partners at the National Book Foundation and 3 great writers. But first, I wanted to tell you something about the Sloan Foundation and what we're doing here. We're a New York-based philanthropy founded in 1934, and we make grants for research and education in science, technology, and economics. Tonight's event is part of our program in public understanding of science and technology, so I wanted to show a short video about the work we do that will provide some context. Please roll.
Our universe began with a bang. Then Earth formed, and life came. 3 billion years later, that life would lead to humanity. Humans developed tools and trade. They painted cave walls and told stories around a fire. This was the beginning of both science and art, of civilization. Science and technology enabled us to understand nature and to build on it. Art and the humanities allowed us to express our deepest feelings and thoughts. They were 2 sides of the same human impulse to survive and thrive. But as art advanced and science became more powerful and specialized, the 2 cultures diverged. This polarization continues to pose a fundamental challenge to modern progress. For more than 2 decades, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation's Program in Public Understanding of Science and Technology has worked to bridge the divide between these 2 cultures. We bring science and the humanities together by empowering creators, writers, directors, playwrights, and others to tell stories that inspire appreciation for scientific discovery and its multifaceted human dimension. Sloan has supported thousands of books, screenplays, films, radio segments, TV shows, plays, and various media from operas to virtual reality that make science more accessible and showcase the pioneering human stories of scientists and scientific achievement that have shaped the modern world. Sloan's exceptional grantees demonstrate what's possible when scientists and artists come together. They dramatize tales of great breakthroughs and tragic failures, as well as the benefits and costs of such endeavors. Their stories promote progress in human knowledge, inspire the next generation, and spotlight the people often left out of the history books. Because before Neil Armstrong could take his giant leap onto the moon, there was a young woman in Virginia who did the math to put him there. As civilization continues to advance, we'll need both scientists and artists to speak a common language and meet new challenges together. Because science is a primary engine of human progress. It touches every part of life on this planet, from our food and water to our climate and health. And it results from human curiosity, benevolence, and ambition. Now, more than ever, we must support artists with a moral, human-centered imagination to portray the complex and far-reaching role of science and scientists in the world, so that we may apply the deepest and most fundamental human knowledge for the betterment of all.
Thank you. So among our multimedia efforts, we have an active book program that has supported over 200 published books with science themes, everything from Richard Rhodes' Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award-winning Making of the Atomic Bomb to Margot Lee Shetterly's trailblazing Hidden Figures. This year alone, we made 20 new book grants and saw 15 new books published, including Vagina Obscura by Rachel Gross, Chip War by Chris Miller, and Mother Brain by Chelsea Conaboy. We also provide science biography fellowships through a partnership with the Leon Levy Biography Center at CUNY. However, like much of society today, we are undergoing an overdue reckoning and acknowledging the need to diversify both the stories we tell and the voices of the storytellers who tell those stories. The latter alone will often lead to the former, since as many of you know, you often write best about the subjects and the people you know best. And this is as true for science, a quintessentially human enterprise, as for any other field. In addition, despite 2 decades of supporting plays, screenplays, and even operas with science themes, we have never before delved into fiction and poetry, so we are breaking new ground with this latest foray. I should emphasize that we are not referring to science fiction, but to fiction about science, imaginative and original stories that engage with real science and credible and compelling scientists, be they heroes or villains. One final note to keep in mind, we are very good at picking winners. One of our signature programs, the Sloan Research Fellowships, is given to the most promising scientists early in their career. To date, 56 of these Sloan Fellows have gone on to win the Nobel Prize. In staking out this exciting new territory, we could not have found a more fitting or exceptional partner than the renowned National Book Foundation. A huge thank you to Ruth Dickey, Natalie Green, and everyone at the National Book Foundation, to our esteemed jury, our extraordinary 3 winners, our moderator, Jennifer Baker, and our host institution, Cooper Union. Now it's my pleasure to hand over the mic to Aimee Nezhukumatathil, award-winning poet, author, and chair of our 2023 Science and Literature Committee.
Good evening. I just wanted to give one more thanks to the National Book Foundation for this immense honor. Usually I'm just a quiet little jellyfish over in Mississippi, and it was just such an honor to dig into this year's most astonishing science writing. Environmentalist Rachel Carson's essays on wonder showcase her wisdom in how to get kids to appreciate science and the outdoors, and how to grow up to be stewards and protectors of the planet. I'm humbled by her wish that, quote, a gift to each child in the world would be a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years. Tonight, you will hear from 3 authors who indeed have that unfailing antidote, who wrote books where science became a moving, breathing, alive thing, whose ability to convey scientific knowledge was captivating right down to the sentence level. My fellow judges, Latif Nasser, Ben Green, J. Drew Lanham, Weike Wang, and I have been working on this very, very, very difficult job since the summer of 2022 to narrow it to just 3 books that most exemplified this, in a sea of books where science was elevated to many, many enchanting and captivating examples. Research has shown that people who read books about other cultures and backgrounds have greater empathy towards people who are different than them, and those who read books when they see themselves in the narrative have more confidence. You see, a sense of curiosity and wonder is kryptonite to people who have forgotten what it's like to admit that they don't know everything about this planet. That sometimes they just might need help from scientists, engineers, historians, yes, even and especially writers. Amidst the growing demand to better understand the social implication, practicing wonder in our lives is so easy and it is free, but it is scary because you have to be vulnerable. But friends, here's what's so beautiful about wonder. When we are curious to learn about other things and other people, when we admit that we would actually like to learn, in that vulnerability, we become more tender and compassionate to those whose lives are very different than ours. It reminds us that even during a pandemic, we are all connected and not alone. Now, these books are in no particular order, but the first book we chose was Dyke, Geology, by Sabrina Imbler. Dyke Geology explores the agony and tender terrain that erupts in a relationship gone sour while expanding our ancient communion with volcanoes. Imbler's hybrid writing is rich with pathos and astonishing lyricism, resplendent in its scientific illuminations that inform and magnify our understanding of our planet and our relationships. For its brevity, this book covers a lot of emotional and literal ground and does so with the fluidity, solidity, and sparkle of a freshly forged chunk of obsidian. The second book the committee chose was Blockchain Chicken Farm and Other Stories of Tech in China's Countryside by Xiaowei Wang. Amidst the growing demand to better understand the social implications of digital technology, Blockchain Chicken Farm, also just as a side note, as a poet, I just love saying that title out loud. If you don't, fix your life. Say it when we're, Blockchain Chicken Farm is so delightful in the mouth. Blockchain Chicken Farm stands out as a culturally sensitive and original contribution. Xiaowei Wang offers a rare and enlightened window into the globalization of rural China and deftly explores how the applied science of modern machinery, of artificial intelligence, is deeply intertwined with people, places, and politics. Each essay in this plucky collection asks urgent questions about our humanity and communal future, shaped now by the rapid rise of tech in seemingly unlikely places. And finally, the last book the committee chose was Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Real Life presents important questions of navigating society and a world of whiteness in the pursuit of a career in science, while also managing the heavy expectations of color, individual expression, community, and family. This novel should hit close to home for any BIPOC academic in science or not who struggles in a tower that is often too ivory and more times than not unprepared to deal with difference. Taylor's work is personally riveting and atmospheric. The dialogue never tires. The scenes are dynamic and well-paced. It is timely and highly recommended reading for all. And now, let us give one big round of applause and mighty congratulations to our 2023 selected authors, Sabrina Imbler, Brandon Taylor, and Xiaowei Wang, and moderator for the evening, Jennifer Baker.
Everybody, how are you? Okay. I'm Jen Baker, she, her pronouns, and I am just astoundingly honored to be on this stage. I had the wonderful chance to be introduced to some people's work and have read and reread other people's work on this stage, and it is just everything those citations said, because those citations were bomb, Amy. I was like, we're done here. This is like, buy the books. So we're going to start off with a short reading by everybody on the stage, and then we'll get into some dialogue and whatnot, which will be super friendly and like chill. We won't have a Q&A from the audience, but your energy is welcome, your energy is needed, and your presence is so appreciated. And so we're going to start with Sabrina, and then Brandon, and then Xiaowei. And hit it, Sabrina.
Thank you, Jen. So I will be reading from my chapbook, which is like 25 pages long, so you're getting like a fifth of the book. A dike, according to geology, is a sheet of magma born in a fracture. Dikes are best understood as the veins of a volcano, coursing hot and varicose toward the surface to erupt. Because of this, dikes are always younger than the body of rock in which they've made their home. Born differently than the mother rock, they make their presence known in rebel coloration, black against white, striped against mottled, crystal against sand. Geologists consider dikes intrusive formations, in part because they were formed underground until exposed. The first time you met my mother, we were sitting down for dinner at a place that served quinoa, where she believed she was to meet my new friend. As I shredded my chicken into a bird's nest with my fork, I bloomed in our secret. I flattered you over and over. Isn't it interesting that she works in sustainable agriculture? I smile and chew. You know, she says that bulgur is the new quinoa. I swallow and hold your hand underneath the table. When I look down, I am startled. Your white skin is darker than mine, browned by so many days climbing rocks in the sun. Dikes indicate that some significant tectonic event took place long ago. Either the Earth's crusts reached toward each other, creating mountain ranges like interlocked fingers across a table, or the crust pulled apart, thinning to the point of a valley like the sagging blanket between two bodies on either side of a bed. Dikes can be tiny, just a matter of centimeters, or huge, running for hundreds of kilometers. The Great Dyke of Zimbabwe isn't some leather-clad butch crusading against Mugabe, but a mark on the land that scours over 300 miles across the country. The dike ripples with deposits of gold, silver, and platinum ore, and has been mined for almost 100 years. From a satellite view, the staggered path of the Great Dyke reminds me of scars left behind after an ACL tear, fissured brown things that stop and start. In the 1894 issue of the Journal of Geology, a man named Henry Lloyd Smith took issue with Dr. M.E. Wadsworth's assessment of a dike in Republic Mountain, Michigan. Lloyd Smith writes, Dr. M.E. Wadsworth, in 1880, as the result of personal examination, concluded that the supposed quartzite tongue was really a granite dike, intruding the jasper. Lloyd Smith insisted, several pages later, that the tongue had to have been quartzite, upholding that silly old binary between rocks and crystals. Of course, a man would have liked to see a quartzite tongue, grains of that soft and iridescent gemstone glinting through the rock. History records very little of the gray, more somber intrusions. If there were stone butches, there may well be granite dikes. Thank you.
That was so good. Oh my gosh. Maybe you should just do my reading also? I'm gonna try to do this. I'm really bad at microphones. I'm really sorry. So I'm gonna read from my novel, Real Life. It's from somewhere near the beginning, in the part that's in a lab. It seemed appropriate. At his microscope at last, Wallace slides plate after plate under the objective. Only mold, like a cotton field in late fall, dark and muddy, prickly with stalks. Clumps of bacteria, bad enough these terrible environmental conditions, bad enough the pits in the agar through which the nematodes sometimes slither and find themselves pressed flat to the plastic base of the dish, which sucks all the moisture from their bodies. But there is also something more worrying to Wallace, dead eggs. Nematodes whose germlines are fisted and gnarled. On some plates, tiny larvae struggle, winking glyphs. These numbers are smaller than expected, as though there was some other underlying problem at work even before the carnage took hold, some invisible calamity. They are not just drenched in spores, which makes it hard enough. The mold has made them sterile, their bodies filled with vacated spaces as though their delicate reproductive tissues have been puffed with air. Vacancies in which the body caves, unusual morphology. He knows it when he sees it. There is a chance that his strain is sterile, that the combination of genetic modifications has rendered a non-viable organism. It will die out. This might be an answer to a question, or it might be the result of contamination, mere noise. He will have to be careful, even more careful. Picking 12 worms from 50 plates means 600 plates, all of which have to be passaged multiple times to free them of the mold, which means something like 1,800 plates, and on top of that, more screening. This is why he fled. The weight of the work it will take to fix this. It feels impossible in the way only possible tasks can seem, when you know that despite the scale of what you must do, it's not really beyond the realm of possibility to do it, and so it feels impossible because you know you must. For a moment, he's tempted by the notion of giving up, starting fresh, not trying to make heads or tails of the mess before him. He looks from the scope to the stacks of plates. They creak when he adjusts them. He could throw them away. Wallace rests his forehead against the eyepiece of his scope. Goddamn, goddamn, goddamn. Thank you.
So mine mentions pigs. On my way to visit the Alibaba headquarters in Hangzhou to learn about how artificial intelligence is being used to farm pigs, I stop in the chaotic inland city of Guiyang, a tech boomtown that is building at a frenetic rate. Tencent, Alibaba, and Apple are all carving data centers into caves close to the city, hidden by subtropical trees. The entire city is an alien terrain, flat earth with mountains that seem to rise out of nowhere. Buildings hang off the sides of mountains with sky bridges connecting skyscrapers. Couriers on motorcycles weave around cars stuck in traffic. Drivers honk aggressively with cigarettes dangling from their lips, windows rolled down. The scent of smog and smoke sticks to the back of my throat. It's evening and the sky is a dark orange as city lights cast a ghoulish veil in the haze of pollution. I leave the tiny efficiency studio I'm staying at on the 40th floor of a high-rise apartment building. The building brims with voices, with electronic dance music, with sounds of living. The elevator stops at nearly every floor, a voyeuristic descent. Floor 38 is a high-end hair salon with two young women waiting in satin robes, tapping away at their cell phones. Floor 35 is dark, empty, a construction site filled with debris, old appliances, and a metal cot. A migrant worker dressed in dusty camouflage gets on in the elevator holding an empty plastic pail and a towel. He's likely sleeping on this floor during his construction work stint. Floor 13 is residential. When the elevator gets to the lobby, I walk through a set of glass doors past a sleeping security guard. Pig life is still on my mind. I wonder, can life be optimized? And if it can, what would you even optimize for? An entire industry exists to optimize porcine life. Corporations like the Pig Improvement Company harness computational genetics and cutting-edge biology to design pigs specifically for industrial farming. Increased agricultural automation has led pigs to becoming physically standardized, like fruits and vegetables. As with an assembly line in a factory, scaling from producing 100 pigs to 100,000 means requiring parts to be the same size and type, interchangeable. Even the unwanted attributes of these pigs are slowly being refined, edited out, physical traits like tails, which are a nuisance in transport, since in crowded conditions, stressed piglets will bite each other's tails off.
Thank you all again. So the first question is really like, where did the books come from? Where did they start? Since people may have read all or some, or maybe becoming familiar with your work, I want to have that entry point as we get into discussion of like, how did it start? Like, and obviously became a published book, but like, how was that process for you in terms of like producing something that we're acknowledging for science and is so encompasses so much? So let's start with Xiaowei and work towards me. Yeah, because y'all are going to be super polite. We're going to be here for a while.
So in about 2017, I had gone to the countryside of China. Well, first I was in the city of Shenzhen, and I had gone there to look at how tech was changing society and culture. And when I got there, my host, David Lee from the Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab, said, "You're in the wrong place. You should be in the countryside because that's where the most dramatic change is happening, both to farming as well as the way that people are making their livelihoods." And so from there, I just started doing research, collecting stories, interviewing people. And as these stories emerged, I knew I wanted to really ground it in lived experience and make it a very accessible book. And so I think that's how Blockchain Chicken Farm really came together, is from on the ground, seeing how people's lives were changing.
Real life, the novel came from the fact that I had this agent who wanted me to write a novel. And at the time I was working in a biochemistry lab as a graduate student in biochemistry, and I wanted to write short stories. And he's like, no, you should write a novel. So I wrote a novel. And thinking about what I could write a novel about, I thought, well, the only thing that I know enough about to put into a book is being a biochemistry graduate student. So, I mean, I wanted to write a campus novel because I love campus novels, but I didn't want to write a campus novel about an English major because I've never been an English major. And like Jeffrey Eugenides already wrote that book. So I was like, I should just do it, but science. And so the book started mainly because I wanted my agent to let me write short stories. And then I set out to write it, and very quickly it became this project of writing about academic life as I was experiencing it then at I think what has turned out to be like a very pivotal moment in science education in America. Like 2013 was like a real dark period in PhD land. Those of you who may also be PhD refugees may know it. And so the book, came a lot from what I was going through as a STEM student, but mainly it was so my agent would let me write short stories.
I'm so grateful you wrote it because there are some beautiful descriptions of worms in the book, and as a worm lover, I'm here for it. Dyke geology began because I was broken up with by a white person who was my first queer relationship, and I was very dramatic back then, but I really felt like my world was falling apart. And I sort of decided also that I wanted to learn about my history as a queer person, so I went on Wikipedia and I typed in Dyke to just learn the history, and Wikipedia took me to, those disambiguation pages where it'll be like Dyke, like all meanings, like Dyke movie, Dyke geology, and I was like, there's a geology version? And that's how I learned about the geological dike, which is often spelled D-I-K-E, depending on where it appears. But I was very interested in sort of the way this word was used so frequently in geologic spaces, and also like has spawned some sayings like put a finger in the dike, which is deranged, that people still say that. So then it sort of became a book-length riff on the many meanings and appearances of the word dike, and the more that I read, the more I felt like there was a very strong connection between rocks and lesbians. And so I think I just kind of wrote into that connection.
So again, the books are on sale outside, Cafe Con Libros. So, but they're so amazing. Oh my God. So I have like so many questions because there's just a fluidity of material that goes from everyone's work. And I don't know if even the committee recognized that, of like these wonderful connections that come up, and even like a sentence here and a scene there and a paragraph here. And that just shows, it epitomizes your brilliance overall, collectively and individually. So in Dyke geology, Sabrina, you mentioned Kate Hutton. And she made a quote-unquote easy switch from astronomy to seismology. And I love this line. So Hutton made that switch because both concern the acquisition of information about things from a distance without ever making physical contact. And that really stuck out to me, not just in what you literally just said, but also throughout all the works of this nature of observation, of how it's very tangible for us, as well as what we're constantly seeing and witnessing and what's projected onto us. And that really is kind of elevated in each of your works. So I don't know if you kind of even take in the context, like with Wallace and in the act of what he's doing with the worms and the study, and but also how he observes the people around him and how much he sees that they don't see and feels that he doesn't feel, or even like coming in and being such a wonderful, humane interviewer and wanting to get to know people, and also kind of interrogating so much about language and etymology. So like, do you kind of see those parallels even in hearing that line of like, well, how did, in the process of writing, what elements did you feel? Like, what elements were from a distance and what were tapped into from kind of a core place? And so we'll do Brandon, Sabrina, Xiaowei.
This like moving target of who's next? Yeah, I mean, what you say about observation makes a great deal of sense to me. I think Wallace as a character is someone who is hyper vigilant. I think that is maybe like a self-selecting thing in the sciences. All the hyper vigilant people end up looking into microscopes for a living. But I think, you know, part of what makes Wallace such a good scientist is what makes him kind of a bad friend in a lot of ways. I feel like, because as a scientist, he is constantly poking and prodding, and he's constantly suspicious, and he's constantly turning things over. And he's never able to accept conclusions. And so the observation, he only has one way of being in the world, and that is like a person who sifts and sorts information and tries to figure out like why things are the way they are. And when I was writing the book, like that felt important to get on the page and important to dramatize both the act of observing and also the consequences of it, because his observations sometimes lead him to make bad choices at dinner parties, and he says the things that he should not say, and he wields information in a kind of dangerous, somewhat irresponsible way, which is also perhaps a self-selecting trait among scientists.
Yeah, I guess when I was writing Dyke geology, I'm now a science journalist, but I wasn't at the time, and so I was reading scientific papers for the first time, and I was reading a lot from the 1800s, which were primarily these very dry, almost like diaristic texts by white men who would like behold a mountain or behold a stone. And they were so boring to me and often like dismissive of the features that they saw, like of the earth, where they would sort of expect one mineral but like find like a less exciting one. And I was like, how dare you disrespect something that you could never make? And also like, I was thinking a lot about who is allowed to observe and let those observations go recorded into science, and who is allowed to name certain features that are like known to local communities, but you know, they are not publishing in Nature or whatever Nature was in the 1800s. And so I think I tried to both push back against that sort of distance, that scientific distance that these old white geologists would sort of impose between them and the land as something to be categorized, something to be classified, something that only like they could name, and something that needed to be named, and try to move into a more like erotic relationship with the land.
Speaking of PhDs, being trained in the social sciences in my PhD program, it's always this, you know, you're always encouraged to have these very like quote unquote neutral or objective perspectives. And if you read a lot of, you know, old school social science, like anthropology, for example, it's deeply problematic, and it always comes from a certain viewpoint, and it really kind of dissects, classifies, and kind of also exoticizes many cultures. And so when I went to rural China, I think I also had the deep privilege of really, I would say, like, you know, people are like, oh, you know, they're so unassuming. We don't have to impress Xiaowei as a guest of any kind. And I think that also I I felt very, just lucky where people let down their guard and felt comfortable sharing with me their stories and their relationship to the technology. And so I was really trying to get beyond the kind of objective, all-seeing eye, and just the ways that, anthropology usually talks about people.
Okay, I think this works now. Magic. So jumping off of that, Xiaowei, like in blockchain, there's that great passage or portion about food safety and the lack of trust that happens. And I feel like that's also occurring here in terms of like, well, what's in our food and how is it created and how are farmers treated and what's that kind of assembly line that's been made that's also been very, like you said, there's been a level of disrespect. So how do we like even start to unpack that? But the trust element really, really stuck out to me because you talk about that for a few pages leading into that particular line that you get into in the first 40 or so pages of Blockchain Chicken. And it touched upon both, again, Sabrina and Brandon, see all these parallels, they're all connected, of the lack of trust that happens to Wallace, of what he experiences a lot of, and the lack of trust that Wallace projects onto other people that isn't necessarily a projection per se, but it is ever present, right? And then Sabrina talking about the breakup, there's a breach of trust that happens there of the assumptions of like, oh, I think I'm safe in this place. So how did y'all tap into trust and kind of want to, if you were thinking of interrogating it or not? So I won't assign anybody this time. I can, as this freaking people out.
Fine.
They're
Whatever.
so
Okay,
polite.
Okay, wow. I was just in the middle of like the tensest polite off. I was sweating from how polite that was. Yeah, I mean, trust felt really important again in the novel because, and I feel like my great subject is like human relationships, and I'm always so fascinated by the fact that people like know how to make other people like them, and they know like what to say to other people to make them want to be their friend or to be in relation to them. And I always felt like I was raised by wolves, and so no one in my family was making friends with anybody. And so as a writer, I feel like writing feels very similar to science in that I'm kind of taking received ideas or like received relationships and putting them under like kind of unbearable scrutiny and zooming in as much as possible to try to understand what's going on there. And so I think for me, friendship and relationships and even being a coworker with someone, I kind of don't know how to do any of that stuff. Like I have no concept of how to be a good friend or coworker. And so as a writer, I'm always asking, I think, like really naive questions. And as a scientist, that's one thing I was trained to do, which was to ask very naive questions about things that we think we know a great deal about. And what you often find is that you know actually very little about it. And I feel like part of the book's project was to dramatize that, like somebody who has no choice but to figure out the rules through observation, and one of those things being trust and being the things that we take for granted, which is like two friends know how to be friends. And I'm just kind of like, no, they don't. Like nobody really knows how to be a friend. Like you might think you do, but you are probably failing one of your friends right this very moment. True.
I can go. I think my love of technology really comes from seeing also the ways that it can be used for more liberatory ends. And so I've been very lucky to be a steward of this community-built school for tech workers who want to build, more liberatory visions of technology. And we had this activist group called Stop LAPD Spying come, and they said something, because LAPD uses all this like predictive policing stuff. And the organization said, the opposite of surveillance is relationship. And that just hit me so hard because it's like, yes, how do we do that messy, building of relationship? And that includes navigating, like, I don't know if I'm a good friend, but also how do we show up in community with people who are in our local neighborhoods, unhoused folks, like just all these different people who are in our physical environments and have that mediated through relationship instead of technology.
That. I guess I was thinking a lot while writing like geology about the relationship that you have with the land and the, sort of lack of a volcano has no moral agenda. It like doesn't want to cause harm, but it often does. But it also brings like enormous good to communities like fertile soil and, so many creatures like crickets like thrive in lava fields, and it's sort of this beautiful and dangerous like chaotic force. And I was really interested in, thinking about Kate Hutton, like scientists, like seismologists who make their careers out of trying to predict like when this thing that looks so still and so dormant like might erupt. And communities have to build so much trust into trusting seismologists and trusting scientists to take care of themselves as we live sort of like in adjacency to volcanoes. And I recently saw this movie, The Fire of Love, which is a great, great documentary about volcanoes that I think gets a lot into sort of like the way that you can have a relationship with something that could obliterate you in a second, which felt like a good metaphor at the time for my relationship.
It's all usable. It's all content. I also love like your acknowledgments, Sabrina, where you're like, Sabrina.
So petty.
It was like the best petty that was like, I hold a grudge. It's really good. You have to read it. I probably didn't relay it in the best way, but it was amazing. I was like, bookmark. So I want to kind of go off on that too, with the studies and looking at relationships and all that, because I decided to just Google, because why not, science writing, right? And it's very, very concrete. It's like research, grants, it was not looking at anything of the context of what we're celebrating today in these awards. It was very finite, right? And it is about study, and it is about just like results. And it made me think of that line in real life. There's like a cost of pursuing that study that's noted of the point is to get your work done. The point is to get results. And it's interesting that in kind of first 2 pages definition, science writing is about results. What are the results of that? And I don't know if it's fair to say there's an ambiguity, but there's not necessarily a resolution in everyone's work, and I'm not saying that there should be, right? But in terms of looking at your works, especially, we're again celebrating it as science and literature, and how those things find space together just separately or to do one particular thing. Do you feel like whatever the result of your work kind of gets there, whether it's answering a question that you had or even just providing information or a level of catharsis? You can take your time too. I know I'm like throwing out questions. You're like, wow, let me think about that. Mm-hmm.
I can go. Okay, I got to go first one time. I guess I was thinking this book, so most of my work now is about life and creatures, as I like to call them, but this book was a sort of a challenge for me because I didn't feel, until I made this connection about the word Dyke in geology, I never really felt an affinity toward rocks or towards crystals, which is like very anti-queer, I guess. But I really took it as like a challenge. And I read a lot of geology blogs. Like there are some great geology blogs at Oregon State University. I really heavily relied on those. And I was just sort of trying to find an in towards something that I thought of as so inanimate and so, I don't know, like non-human, right? It's like a mineral. It's not something living. But I found like it was a challenge for me to find my route into finding that spark and finding that passion and thinking like, what is my connection to this subject? And for me, it was really like, there are so many words in geology that are so beautiful and strange and are not used enough. Like, I learned about horsts and grabens, which the definition you can find in here because I don't remember them now. But there were so many beautiful words that sort of appeared in these otherwise dry texts, and I was like, how can I bring them into something more lyrical, and how can I find my route in? And I think it was also a challenge for me to be able to see myself in various fields of science and to really follow my instinct of like, oh, this feels queer to me, like then it is queer, and like let me follow that. And I feel like the result that I was hoping to create was sort of to open a channel into geology that maybe people who wouldn't have otherwise been interested in rocks or something to sort of find their way into that part of the natural world.
Yeah, I mean, that's so beautiful. Wow, that's kind of iconic. Now I want to know what those words mean, so I will buy the book. I think, so when I was in graduate school, my advisor kind of didn't know what to make of me because I was like a weird person to be doing science. Like my verbal GRE was much higher than my quantitative GRE, and really we should have known there was trouble afoot from then. But again, in 2013, I think in the sciences, they realized that they had a humanities problem because no one could write or read, and so there were suddenly all of these programs in science communication and science writing. I think it's because like they could see like this decades-long crusade in America, like this anti-intellectual crusade like bearing fruit, and they're like, oh no, we've got to get out ahead of this. We got to have people writing about science in newspapers. And so suddenly there was this great flourishing of like science writing and science communication programs. And my advisor was like, well, you went to this weird writing retreat. You seem to like writing. You should be doing that. And so she was like stewarding me in that direction. And I found that like, it was like it was so unbearable because so much of the thrust of science writing seemed to be, as you say, not just like focused on results, but a kind of like packaging of science and like shuttling it out into the world. And what to me felt like a very NPR-y voice. Like every science talk suddenly went from being on slide 5, you will see the C. elegans germline. It went from that to like, let me tell you a story about 3 intriguing, I prepared for you 3 narratives today. And I'm like, you're talking about RNA. There's no, you do not gotta wrap it up in a narrative. And so I found science writing just like that. It felt very slick and overproduced and strange to me. And so my response was to write like, I was like, I want to write Mrs. Dalloway, but science. And so that's what I set out to do. I really just like wanted to write a novel about campus life that reflected the realities of being in STEM because I hadn't read a lot of books about STEM before, like in a modern idiom. And I wanted to write a book that felt like really tapped into that. Because scientists, the ones I knew, I mean, I was always being told by my fellow grad students, like, it's not enough just to do the science. You've got to find the poetry in it. Like, you got to find the meaning of it. Like, it can't just be, I plated 7 plates of nematodes. Like, the why of it all. Like, being able to communicate not just in terms of like widgets, but like because we are solving the great mysteries of humankind, you know? Like, so find all that sort of like weird theology that science lost in the 19th century and like bring it back in ways that are not hostile to science. But anyway, that's what I set out to do. I wanted to just write Mrs. Dalloway, but science, about my weird little nematodes. And one last thing about the queerness of science, like I worked in nematodes. I worked in like a self-fertile, the germline of a self-fertile hermaphroditic worm. And every day I went to work, I was like, ah, yes, my gay little besties. Who will you be today?
Amazing. So I think, yeah, similarly, like when I was working in tech and you're an engineer, you're tasked with writing documentation for the next person. And I quickly found out that I was more interested in writing the documentation than actually doing the engineering part. And actually I had coworkers who were like, you're a pretty good writer. Have you ever thought about writing? And I was like, no, I guess we should fix this code or something. And I think also writing about tech too, it's like Silicon Valley has really just commandeered words in such a way, like with like so many new phrases, as well as just this kind of marketing copy that's like, this almond juicer will solve everything if you just buy it, and will change the future. Like everything always ends in this kind of phrasing that's really obvious. And so I think with Blockchain Chicken Farm, I really just wanted to open up more questions and more spaces of possibility rather than answering like, oh, tech is bad, or any definitive, tech is doing X, Y, Z to the future, and this will definitely happen. And I think it really came out of a, total allergy to the Silicon Valley like way with words.
Thank you. I see it's 7:32, so does that mean keep going? One more. Okay. I'm not good at charades, y'all. You don't want me on your team. They'll be like, Jen, not Jen. Oh man, I have so many. Oh, it's gonna be like, just, no, not that one. Not that one. I'm sorry, I got like 15, so. I know, we're just gonna vibe. So I'm gonna end with this one because there's that aspect of, Sabrina, you've been talking, so I'm like, oh my God, so in love with everybody's book, but like, especially what you're talking about, like looking at the minerals and the dissection of it. And there's a moment in blockchain where Xiaowei mentioned MEGV algorithms that break down bodies and life into numbers and parts. And you raise the question of the inability to see the whole or even the who when it comes to this dissection of everything. And so each of you dissect so much. And there's kind of overlap with the earlier question in that way. But in terms of like when you're looking back at your work, and even us in discussion about it right now, like how does that dissection and that breaking down kind of come apart for you, be it in your writing process or even in seeing how the work kind of came to fruition once it was done?
Here we go. One more time. So I think dissection plays a really obvious role in my work, mainly because I spent most of my abandoned PhD dissecting things. I would spend 10 hours a day cutting the heads off of worms in a tiny drop of tranquilizer. And I think as a writer, the shape I am always imagining in my mind is like a knife. I want prose that is sharp and clear and like a perfect implement to like wedge apart things and to cut through things. And I'm not interested in like, I'm not interested in like mess or viscerality. I'm only interested in like a perfect, terrifying precision. And like, I'm always trying to cut things as thin as I possibly can. And I think my aesthetic project is one of like, I think you could sum it up by calling it a scalpel. I am interested in what we find when we cut things as thin as we possibly can and we look through them. And so I think, yeah, for me, the act of writing is very much like sectioning things and looking at them and testing them and trying to find some new grain of truth in it or whatever. And yeah, and so dissection to me feels both the thing I'm after and the way I'm doing it, I think.
I think for me in the research process, oftentimes when I go to these tech companies or, science tech companies, and there's like so much of that like heady scientific writing, and it's like, we have these results, okay, we're gonna do this with our technology. I always ask the question like, what is this for again? And it's actually interesting to just have like these very simple questions for people who are so in it, and to kind of unravel from there and see themselves consider and reflect on this question, right? And so I think that act of, as you were saying, precision feels very important to me in that research process.
I think there's a lot of quote unquote dissection in geology, and that you are sort of breaking apart rocks to be like, there's another rock inside, right? Like the geode, like it's beautiful purple crystals inside. But I feel like that often sort of displaces the rock from the very like natural geological place that it came to be. And I don't know if I would say this, I was like writing against dissection, but I really wanted to sort of track the lives of things that we just see of as like pebbles or rocks or like, you know, something that you could buy in a shop and think about the life of that rock and when it first emerged on the earth and sort of the magmatic processes that might have been involved or the sedimentary processes, and just to think about the great arc of time that has like created this crystal that you now have in front of you. And to sort of, yeah, I don't know, imbue rocks with this like enormous life and animism that they do have just beyond our human time scale.
Ooh, that's deep. Thank you. Thank you. This has been, so I literally do have like 8 more questions for y'all, but we have to go. Y'all have to buy books, and we want to further celebrate y'all. But thank you so much, Xiaowei, Brandon, Sabrina, for these amazing books, these thoughtful books, your wonderful candor, everything. It's been such a pleasure to read your work and get to know you as people on this stage. So congratulations for everything. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I also want to note that these 3 are on the road as of April, so each of you will be doing some one-on-one conversations. And you should definitely go to National Book Foundation's website if you happen to be in like Chicago. I think it's Chicago, Boise, and what's one? Los Angeles. So if you're here now, but if you happen to be there at some point in April and May, definitely go tell your friends, tell your family, tweet it, Instagram it, all that good stuff. So definitely spread the word that they will be doing all that good stuff. Again, Café Con Libros, thank you to everyone who is here. Thank you, National Book Foundation, Sloan Foundation, the judges, and for picking these amazing books and that beautiful citation. And again, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much.